All right. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Player Driven Live. I am Greg, your host, and I am really excited about today's episode. There is no lack of information to talk about. Today, I have my normal co host, Colin Neese. You want to say hi, Colin? Join with me?
Hey, I grew up to co-host. How exciting. Do I get
Yeah,
like a t-shirt or something like that, Greg?
don't let it go to your head. It's in the mail.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back as a co-host now. I'm gonna put that on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I think you and I have a lot of differing opinions in the best way possible this week, and I'm really excited to go toe to toe with you. And I am also joined by Itamar Rogel from Afagata. Itamar and I have known each other for years, and I'm super excited to be able to convince him to come out here today and have this conversation. How are you, man?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, and honored to be here with you and Colin. And I hope to have something to add to the discussion. Just as a quick background, I'm a co-founder of Afogata, where we work with gaming companies to help them understand their players more. So usually, if I talk about data or how players feel, it's more from the perspective of player experience, player feedback, just because we look at a lot of conversations like on a really massive scale. And just for the avoidance of doubt, anything that I say will be purely based on public data, right? I'm not going to share obviously anything that's like from work with customers or anything, just public data. That's definitely a lot of and very interesting to analyze. That's it. That's my quick intro.
Boring. No hot takes from Itamar's side this week, huh?
Not yet, not yet.
Well, luckily, we have a ton of other information we can talk about. There's been a lot of news in tech and gaming altogether, and I think this has been building up for when was ChatGPT released, right? This anxiety of what is AI going to do, what's going to happen here, right? And we're starting to see some of these dominoes fall. So today, we're going to start by talking about Amazon. And I know Colin's got a whole lot of feelings about Amazon. So let's talk about the details before we get into the opinion here, right? Amazon is cutting up to 30,000 corporate jobs this week. That's nearly 10% of its white collar workforce. Here's some facts that people should know. Cuts span from HR to devices to operations to even AWS, which powers a huge share of online games. So that includes Twitch as well. AWS posted $30.9 billion in Q2 revenue. That's 17.5% increase year over year of revenue made, but it's still under pressure from its investors to justify its AI investments. Amazon is leaning heavily into AI and automation to replace routine work, mirroring a broader trend across all of tech and gaming. And this will be the largest layoff in Amazon history, surpassing the 27,000 roles cut in 2002, which included as well Twitch, Prime, and other devices. So here's the tension. Profits are rising, things are going well, Wall Street is happy, AI adoption is accelerating, but people are being cut. And that's not a tech story. It's one that ripples through the gaming infrastructure, live ops community, and support. There's going to be a lot to talk about here. I'm really curious, Colin, if you want to let us know. I know you have it out for big tech, and I'd love to hear your opinion on what we see happening here.
Oh my gosh. Well, first off, I don't think I have it out for big tech. I in fact came from big tech. I spent 5 years as a happy employee of Twitch, which was owned at the time by Amazon, still is obviously, right? So let's just say my perspective on tech just very much is what are the incentives and how they kind of think about KPIs there and how does that trickle down to divisions, including gaming, right? I think that is one way in which I come informed. The other one is I think you laying out the table. Thank you so much, Greg. One thing I would just add to it, and I think this gets missed so much, is while they're also seeing increased revenue and profits, at least the way they're doing their accounting, they're also committing an insane amount of spend in the somewhat mid to very near future to AI capex spend, right? So they're buying a crazy amount of billions of dollars in GPUs from NVIDIA. They are, or in Amazon's instance, I believe they're investing in their own version of it, Tranium, I think is what it's called. I could be wrong, so anyone in the chat, please correct me. I'm kind of shooting for the hip on that one. And so they're investing in that. And they also have to invest in power infrastructure, right? Because these things don't power themselves. The power and energy and the kilowatts have to come from somewhere, which is always what I felt is going to be the larger friction for all big tech and as it relates to gaming, which I hate that. I mean, like, I literally wrote about this topic on Friday last week, and then Amazon did this the following week. So I felt like I was early by just 2 days, but I felt like something was going to break on the side. And it's been a thing that we've talked about before, Greg, which is like there's this push from Wall Street to spend more money on AI, and then they have these gaming divisions that literally make like marginal sense on their stock price or marginal impact on the stock price. Like gaming could cease to exist at Amazon tomorrow, and their stock would probably go up by half a point, right? Whereas if they miss on AI, then the wealth of the senior leadership of Amazon is going to get cut by like 50% tomorrow, right? So that's their goal set. How do we win this thing? This thing is basically a distraction. So when it comes to Amazon specifically, what I would say there is they have been trying gaming since I was working at Twitch. So this is not just a foray of recent that they spent like 3 years doing it and they gave up and threw the white towel. They've been at this for like 10 years, right? They started with Twitch, which led into Lumberyard, which is its own thing. We can probably spend a lot of time talking about Lumberyard if you want to, but trying to get developers to build on Lumberyard, that wasn't really working. They pivoted ish to try to making their own games in house. They tried various games that never saw the light of day. I won't comment on that because I was an NDA at Twitch at the time. Let's just say I saw a lot of stuff that never made it out past the kind of here's what we have cooking. And then New World came out. And honestly, I would say New World, which sadly was very much impacted by what happened this week, was a solid success, right? Its audience did deteriorate greatly since its launch, but I would call it a solid success and a proof of concept to Amazon. They can make games and they can drive attention to these games. And then the next game they did was Lost Ark, which I would say was a really solid hit, right? Granted, it was a license play from a Korea game, right? So they just brought it over here, but still, it generated a lot of attention, a lot of players, et cetera, et cetera. It was after that game that things just started deteriorating game by game release. And I think the most recent game they had, King of Meat, based on our Steam data set, reached hundreds of players. Hundreds, not thousands, not tens of thousands, hundreds. And if Amazon's in the business of making games and what they're pulling in is hundreds of players, then that would call that a miss. And that's just on the game creation side. But like ultimately, Amazon is a flywheel company. They talk about this, books have been written about the Amazon flywheel. And to me, it's what is the flywheel for gaming? The flywheel for Twitch was, you know, we have a bunch of young men who don't have Prime subscriptions. We will try to bundle Twitch in some sort of offering that gets young people to get Prime subscriptions. And that is the flywheel, right? So Twitch is an acquisition tool to Prime. At least that's what it was when I was there from 2015 to 2019, 2020. I'm struggling to see what the flywheel for game is because if I subscribe to a game or Amazon Prime, do I get the game for free or I still have to play it on Steam? Like what's the flywheel and how does this grow and like feed into Amazon? And that's like the open question that I don't think has really been resolved there, which is where I see like Amazon makes sense that they would at least pull back their investment in gaming and try to like reset what they're trying to do, if not outright leave the entire gaming sector altogether. Because again, that's the opportunity cost of do I put this talent toward games and attention toward games, or do I put it toward AI capex spend, growing AWS, and ensuring we win this race, not this race. So I would love to hear your thoughts, Greg. Do you, and Imar, like, do you guys agree with that take? Disagree? Kind of fall in the middle?
Idamar, you want to kick it off here, or you no thoughts yet?
Sure. I think, it's always hard to discuss layoffs, right? Because layoffs, we're talking about numbers, but each of these numbers, each of these is a person, is a family, and it's always very difficult, right? I do think that you even said these, white collar workers, and I think let's talk, kind of a hypothetical scenario that instead of firing white collar workers, we would hear about Amazon would do a press release. Hey, we finally figured out how to do all the warehousing and logistics and shipping with robots. So we're laying off all these employees and we're going to offer them severance and whatever. I don't think this would get as much attention. I think people would probably say, well, that's what happens. You go and automate and blah, 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 and destructive creativity or whatever, right? So I think a lot of people, and I know this is, maybe some people will get upset at this, I think people expect the AI. Did they expect the AI to come for people? They just didn't expect the AI to come for them. Because if it's for the people in the warehouses, oh, it's natural. That's of course robots are replacing that, and it's a horrible job anyway. But if it's me, who's sitting in my office and writing documents, that's really upsetting. Now, of course, I'm exaggerating, but I think if they actually can do it, do they really have a choice? And I think Wall Street, and look at Meta today, right? They're basically, their stock is having a horrible reaction because they're investing in AI, as all the big tech companies are, and they're not showing something for it, right? So compare Google, for example. I think Wall Street is okay with the investment if they see you something for it, that you can see the revenues. I think Meta is not showing that yet. Previously, they were kind of considered and a leader in AI somehow. I think now that story is not really alive anymore. They don't really have any strong AI product going on right now, right? You could say, well, they're using it in advertising, and same kind of the same for Amazon. They have the AWS story. To be honest, Amazon hasn't been great at telling stories to investors in a long while now. But what is their big AI story? They have some chips. Obviously, AWS is the benefactor. What else is going on? So I don't think it's that easy for them to pour capex into the investment that they feel they need to do. So they're on the other side. They're just trying to save on costs. And the question is, if they can do it, shouldn't they be doing it? As bad as it is, and would we be talking about it if these were just like some other lower ranked blue collar workers replaced by robots? Which doesn't make it any less horrible, right? But it just really, is it avoidable? That's my question.
Well, to play devil's advocate, right? It has been happening to the lower level workers for years. They've been putting automations and robotics in the warehouses to do it, right? So it's a trickle down effect. I think your point is really valid, though, right? If you asked me 5, 10 years ago, I would say, oh, truckers are going to be the first ones replaced, right? Everyone's talking about autonomous trucking, and it just hasn't taken off. And I think, yeah, there is that element of, oh crap, it's me, it's not them. But at the same time, I'm looking at the world right now, and maybe that's a bad idea to be doing because it's not a pretty picture, right? And it's the top is getting richer, the bottom's getting poor, but who buys the products that run those Wall Street companies? Who's going to be able to afford all this stuff from Amazon when push comes to shove, right? And it's going to be, well, Wall Street's partying and having a good time because of record profits, but by next quarter, people won't be able to afford the product that they're putting out there. And then all of a sudden, shit's really going to hit the fan. And that's my big fear of where we're heading, is that we are letting the bottom get really messy and the top is getting big ballooned with money, and eventually the bottom is just going to fall out, and people won't be able to afford things anymore. And that's where kind of my head is at, is like, and maybe I'm overdoing this, and maybe this happens generation to generation where people worry about, oh, the internet's here now, the calculator's here now, the car is here, right? But like, I don't know. I worry about what people who are laid off are going to do and where they're going to find jobs and how they're like, people just aren't hiring.
Yeah, well, this is getting really heady, so I'm not gonna get heady too. Like, let's bring this back to basically the Industrial Revolution. Like, the idea of mid-level management or mid-level employees only started with the advent of the railroad and the Industrial Revolution, because now a person in a small town could now sell his goods and services to people further away, in part because of steam and powered engines and the ability to transport goods and services from Chicago to California, right, by rail, right? So this created an entire new class of workers, which, I would say the white collar worker broadly is downstream from the industrial revolution. So I told you we're going to get really heady, and so I while I'm not going to say AI in of itself is the equivalent of the industrial revolution, I think we're seeing the end game of what I would call the internet digital revolution, right? The end state of it, which is where AI is coming in, where it's going to just create a lot of efficiencies because a lot of tasks that people were doing can be automated. From me typing a PowerPoint presentation on my keyboard to a doctor diagnosing a patient for a very type of rare disease. Like, all these things, you could see a future that is less science fiction and more reality, where that could be done by a robot. So, you know, the sad part, to kind of echo everything what you guys have said, is like, I tell my better half that, like, our kid's going to learn to be an electrician, because you need your hands and you need to go in there in the wall and do things. So electrician is the career of the future. And I think the point about this being only a story because it was happening to, white collar people or middle class people as opposed to people in the Midwest where I'm from. So this story is very near and dear to my heart. I think it's absolutely true. Like if it was another town in Ohio or Minnesota or Wisconsin or Iowa getting shut down because they outsourced their factory to Mexico, Canada, or even or Asia broadly, like no one cares anymore. Like I just like it kind of falls on deaf ears. Whereas now it's happening to people in New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles. Now it's a much bigger story, quote unquote, even though it's the same story. It's just happening in urban centers and not in rural areas, right? So I think that's a major transition that's happening. And not trying to be political, just kind of is what it is, right? Now, I would like to try to bring some of this back to gaming. I think what I see happening as a silver lining with all this is I also think the the democratization of distribution platforms is happening. So there's more opportunity for very creative people to make very creative games at a much like lower cost to them personally. Maybe they don't even have the skill, but AI and the tools that are created because of AI or other kind of just technologies enable them to do what they always want to do is build the thing they couldn't build under the hierarchy of a big organization. And I think you're seeing that in a lot of successes this year. Like by our estimations at my game, which we track the entire gaming ecosystem, this has been the year of indies, honestly. Indies and double A. Like they have punched through at the level of triple A's more than they have ever done so in our tracking dating back to 2019. So this is probably downstream from that, where more people are able to take more, bets with smaller teams and find success. Now, there's also more stuff, so the win ratio is pretty bad, right? For every Clair Obscure Expedition 33, there is dozens, if not hundreds, of games that never find an audience. But the fact that that opportunity exists didn't exist before because of gatekeepers. And this kind of goes home to what I went through in like my previous life when I was at Twitch is like the creator economy. You hear this from the entertainment people like, oh, UGC content, it's not real content. We have to have, 3 cameras and we have to have a studio audience. We have to do all these things. Whereas Mr. Beast is off filming like incredible stuff on his own in North Carolina. It's like, what is premium content? Like, doesn't matter anymore, right? And I think we've come to that conclusion across content, and you can see the movie industry and everything else kind of being decimated because of it. And I just see like gaming is probably on the same curve, maybe not exact same outcome, but like, you could see it happening at Roblox stuff. You can see it happening in other UGC platforms. You could see it even happening on Steam with like unquote games made by one person. And I think that's kind of where this is probably heading, right? Which is good and bad.
It depends if you see that runway lasting forever or if you see that runway starting to dry up as gaming does or doesn't continue to grow. Does the creator economy continue to grow? And it's an interesting transition to kind of the Microsoft topic. And I don't want to go there yet, but a lot of the points you're making are kind of the bonus points, I'd say, why Microsoft is making these decisions, right? It's taking a look at that. But I don't know. Any other thoughts on your side, Itamar?
Yeah.
Or
Oh,
go
Inmark,
for it, man.
please jump in. I had one more thought on Amazon before I break, but I could save it for the end. Inmark, jump in, please.
No, go ahead. I actually wanted to ask you something about what you said earlier about Amazon. So please go ahead
Oh,
first.
I will say this one more thing. I think Amazon has a very bright future, or maybe a brighter future in the licensing play, right? So you see this right now. So Bond, the 007 game coming out in the spring of next year, is by our estimation is going to be one of the hits of the early spring, right? I could just look at the data now and say, yeah, this game's going to probably do well, barring a complete catastrophe, but it's on pace to not do as well as Resident Evil, but it's like, the second place game that has a firm date in the spring so far. So congrats. Now, was Amazon involved in that game? No, the Broccoli family still own the rights, and so it. But are they going to get quasi credit for it now? If you watch the trailer, they have Amazon Games as one of the quote unquote publishers of the game. So I think this kind of points to a path where, and the Lara Croft stuff they're doing with Embracer Group, and I think they're making a Lord of the Rings game that's maybe in question now. But like you could see where they become more of a licensor, where they don't make the games in house, but maybe they license some of the IP they own to other gaming studios, and then publish it, because I think Amazon, if they just focus purely on marketing and publishing, is actually a great engine. They sell games on their platform. Makes a lot of sense to publish them too, right? So I do see a strategy that would work, but it does entail them not making games as much and more licensing it. But a company that made that decision a long time ago, and I think some people say it was successful, some people say it was not, was Disney. They were like, we're out. We're going to license our IP to gaming companies to make games, and Out of that, we got Insomniac Games, Marvel, like Spider-Man series. We're getting Wolverine next year. I think that's awesome. Would Disney have ever made that Wolverine game that I saw the trailer for? Never. Never. But as a Wolverine fan, I'm happy that they don't have to sully the Disney brand by making a very bloody and gory Wolverine game. They just give it off to Sony to make it there. And like, I think that's great. So I think there is upside in just realizing that we don't make games in house. We just license our IP and maybe control it a lot more than other people would. So I think that maybe is the upside for Amazon.
Yeah, I wanted to ask. So you mentioned Lumberyard, and
Oh no.
I was always curious, and maybe there's history that I'm not familiar with, but related to directly to what you just said. It sounds more so, you could say that Lumberyard is more along the lines of maybe the AWS kind of line of business, technical engine, but for Amazon, it would make, superficially from the external perspective, more sense to look at their neighbor Valve and say, hey, we should have done that, or we should do that 5 years ago or whenever, because distribution, that's what they do. The distribution, the footprint, that like they have Prime. You could argue, you could debate if Prime is like Game Pass in some ways or whatever, but it's kind of the same model. How come they didn't show, or maybe I'm not aware, like there was some massive effort around it? It really seems like it would be up their alley. So what's the story there?
Real quick, but when you answer this, Colin, can you just give us, for those that may not know, what is Lumberyard?
Lumberyard was Amazon's attempt, or maybe it's still ongoing. Chad, please correct me if it's still ongoing. I assume it's been kind of sunsetted, or at least maybe it's not under the same name. I could be completely wrong there, though. So Lumberyard was basically Amazon's attempt at building a game engine that people would build on, right? But you're competing against Unreal and Unity, so it's almost like they came into it like a decade late. Like Epic had been doing this with Unity for a very long time, or sorry, doing this with Unreal Engine for a very long time, and Unity pretty much owned the mobile landscape. So I think of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and building it in-house was unlikely thing to see success in long term, right? It's very much in their business to be like, oh, we will build an AWS. Like I think that's what Lumberyard was for game engines at their attempts. Like we'll build an AWS, it'll be cheaper than everything else. We'll drive in people because of that. And gaming just never took hold of it like they did everything else, right? So I think that's the Lumberyard decision, and I think it was a mistake. In terms of distribution, I think what you're asking, and I don't know nothing. I don't know. But I assume Valve, given that they're also in Seattle, has had very senior level meetings where both Microsoft and Amazon have rolled the money truck inside and said, what will it take to buy you out? And every time they're like, no, we're pretty happy with where we're at. That seems to be the decision they made every single time. So I assume the money truck has been driven up to Valve headquarters and dumped in front of them. And every time they've just said, nah, we're good. So
I think it
that's
should have been
more,
like a huge shipping thing because the guy is on the yacht all the time, right? I think the Valve
yeah.
guy.
I swear I've read something before where Microsoft did that multiple times, like in the Ballmer era, and then fast forward to the Satya Nadella era, right, where they've kind of dropped the money truck in front of them, and they've like no, because they're happy with what they do and where they're at. So, and I think that's great. Good for Valve. Thumbs up, Valve. Good job.
Yeah.
Don't take the giant infinite money check and control your own destiny with a very successful company and do what you want to do, which is run Steam, make cool handheld consoles from time to time, and occasionally come out with a game, but never more than two because you break your threequel. We'll never make a threequel. To my dismay of a Half-Life Millennial, where I'm like, I would love nothing more than Half-Life 3, but that game will never exist.
Do you think there's just this point that big tech can't be in gaming because they're always chasing their bigger fish and AI here, and web power and servers and all that stuff that power gaming? Like why create something when you're the hammer that creates everything, right? Like
Yeah, I would love to use this as a way to transition to Microsoft. I think was on, but like, yeah, I wrote about this, and like this is my hypothesis: can big tech be good at gaming? And I only dissected Amazon, which I think we've exhaustively talked about, Netflix, which I would say it's really hard to make a game. It's even harder to put like obstacles in the way of making a great game because you arbitrarily think it's better to have it as a party game inside your own ecosystem, or you want users to chase downloading mobile apps outside of your ecosystem to then take advantage of the Netflix subscription. And that's basically what they've been doing thus far, and I'm perplexed why that is their strategy. I just don't think it'll ever work, and so I would say until proven otherwise, I would just say probably not happening. And then I would jump to Microsoft, which to me their challenge with it is like, regardless of how well or not well they do in gaming, it makes no movable metric at all on their stock price, which is what they care about, right? So it doesn't actually affect their valuation. And if something they do, no matter how well or bad they are at it, and it doesn't move their stock price either way, then it becomes a question of, then why are we even doing this, right? And I think that's just incentives at big companies. At some point, they're going to look around the room and say, why are we doing this? And that's why I would not be shocked. I'm not saying it'll happen, but if Microsoft vacates the gaming ecosystem in the next 5 to 10 years, color me not surprised. It would make a lot of sense to just get out of it, wipe their hands clean of it, and just focus on what they do, which is enterprise software, servers, and supporting those AI server investments with more enterprise software. That is their business at Microsoft. And gaming is just something that really stuck around since the Ballmer era because it was the only thing they were good at for about 8 years. So that's why they very much cling on to Xbox.
Same feelings, Idamar?
Yeah, I think it's hard because I mean, if you're big tech and you're looking at gaming, you see something that there's a lot of money sloshing around there, and it also a lot of people's time, just attention goes playing games, right? But I don't think gaming ultimately is a creative business. There's a it's hard to create, and Colin mentioned earlier, like Amazon and other tech companies, they look for the way to create something at scale, is positive feedback loop, something that grows and scales. And I think it's hard to do that. The closest that gaming got to that, you could say, live service titles. Some companies, like we mentioned, EA, that have like recurring franchises, maybe on an annual basis. Those things, maybe, but otherwise, it's really hard. And I think they've been toying around with different angles because they kind of feel that they need to be there. A lot of people's attention and time and money goes there. So how do we take part of that? And also, you mentioned some history in Microsoft's case, but I think they're gaming, like in terms of the goals that they set themselves, gaming has been underperforming over the last few years, I think, right? And they haven't got their performance bonuses or whatever at the management level. I think they just haven't cracked how to approach it. And I think an exit is very likely, or just taking some kind of side perspective. That's why I'm surprised that's why distribution makes a lot of sense, especially with the recent change in the App Store. And that's why I would be surprised that Amazon haven't tried, and maybe they will try, but maybe in this era they don't do this kind of bets. But some kind of big distribution bet around gaming just seems to make a lot of sense. We haven't seen that, and maybe we won't.
I don't think there's any chance Microsoft gets out of gaming. I think even if you look at Windows and how they built it out, it's all about user, understanding who your users are, all that, right? Xbox gives them the ability to create this community full of people that they can track from a younger age, making sure that they understand the tools, the products, the things that get them excited. I really love what Microsoft said as an Xbox fan, and I get the hate for it, and it could definitely go the wrong way, and I get that, right? But they want to be everywhere. And I did a podcast with Sean Layden. He was in charge of PlayStation during the PS3 era. And he mentioned the concept of the VCR. And the way the VCR really started to take off was that other brands started making VCRs. It wasn't just, I forgot who it was, RCA or something at the time, right? And that means other people started making hardware that you can run your stuff off of. And then all of a sudden, widespread adoption happened. And that's how it happened. When you break it down to, you need to own an Xbox, you need to own a PlayStation, right? Like, you're going to automatically segment the market. And they've addressed, so just so people understand, right? So Matt Booty, one of the guys who's in charge of Xbox, came in and said that our biggest competition isn't another console. We are competing more and more with everything from TikTok to movies. And then Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, doubled down on that, saying gaming's competition is short form video. If we don't continue to innovate as an industry, how do we produce? What do we produce? And how do we think about the distribution and the economic model, right? And what I like about that, and I don't know if you guys saw this new sledding game that they kind of put out, or it's coming out in Game Pass, I think this month or next month, right? Like, good for him, good for that guy who created it. It's your typical slop of a game, and I don't mean that as an insult. It's a game that someone kind of built out in a couple months, put it together, got famous on TikTok, got a lot of people following. Like, that's what Microsoft sees that vision of being, is kids are in games real quick. If you have to load a AAA title, and I think what this is going to do is actually fragment the gaming business in a good way. I think casual gamers will go one way and real hardcore gamers will go the other. And if you think about how gaming community started years and years and years ago, I don't know why I was thinking about this morning, but I was thinking about World of Warcraft. You had these communities of people that were just diehard World of Warcraft fans, and that's what they were talking about. Gaming wasn't as big as what it was back then, but they had a passionate group, a passionate community of players that built this stuff. And I think we're going to be heading back in that direction. I think the internet's going to become full of slop that AI is generated, and people are going to be sick of that. So what they're going to do is they're going to want to find their common grounds where they're people that they relate with are, right? I think gaming as an audience gets a little smaller, but I think you have real gaming, and I say that in a terrible way, but like those are your AAA titles, right? Then you're going to have those short form content, these sliding games that people can boot up, right? I think this is natural progression. I think gaming became the biggest media, biggest kind of form of entertainment over the years. And when you're the biggest, you're going to feel the pressure of Wall Street and everyone to produce, make money, do this, do this. Now short form videos coming in. It's kind of taking some of that pressure off gaming, which people look at as a bad thing because they're saying, oh, we're losing players to short form video. Maybe those are the players you can afford to lose because those are the ones that aren't diehard into gaming to begin with. And I'm just speculating and throwing a bunch of crap against the wall, but my mind kind of is that point where we might be breaking up here, and that might be a good thing because gamers go one way and then the trends go that other way.
I have so many comments. I gotta tackle them one by one, but I'll try my best to structure this a bit. To that end, I would start off with well, let's start off with the Microsoft bit. So Microsoft's gaming portfolio, what does that include? It includes acquisitions from Bethesda, ZeniMax, includes acquisitions from and I'll only look at the most recent, like let's say 5 to 10 years. So Mojang and Minecraft has been part of Microsoft for a very long time at this point, so I would just consider them part of the Microsoft blob. But Activision, Blizzard, and King kind of be the other one. So like they keep acquiring gaming companies to stay ahead of the curve, and yet their revenue, I mean, their overall service revenue is down by a point, so let's call it flat, and their console business is falling off a continual cliff, right? Which I guess to your point, I don't think it's wrong. They don't really care about hardware; they care about the distribution being anywhere. So, and I actually think that's a valid strategy. I'm like, yeah, they shouldn't. They lost hardware. Like, why are we continuously punishing ourselves by chasing hardware? Where if you were to list them in terms of where they stack rank relative to every other gaming device or platform, I would put them near the bottom, behind PlayStation, behind Nintendo, behind Steam ish, behind mobile, both app stores, iOS and Android. So like if you look at gaming, where do they rank? Pretty far down. So they have nothing to lose other than just trying to find more ways to distribute their storefront, which makes sense. And I think to your point, Imar, I think it's distribution at the end of the day. So that makes sense. Where I get kind of challenge is like they continue to try to make their own games that they're not good at. So they keep buying studios to buy their IP to then get them to make games. But Microsoft, Minecraft aside, which is something they never talk about publicly for reasons that baffle me, is by far their biggest game they own, and yet they never really mentioned 3 words about the thing. Which I don't know if this is like a hide the thing. Like if we don't mention it, people won't ask us about it because they own a Roblox platform basically, and yet they never even champion or talk about it at all, which is one of the more perplexing things in earnings calls. But like let's like take the Nadella's like mind share of his actual thinking. They suck at gaming. They're good at gaming. It does nothing to Microsoft's earnings price. So if you're a CEO, how much brain power do you want to put toward a gaming division that is inconsequential to the people you're trying to please on Wall Street? Like, I don't think it matters. I don't think Wall Street cares what Microsoft does or doesn't do in gaming. I think they would probably see a bump in their stock price if they were tomorrow say we're exiting this thing, and they'd be like, great, you can put more of your resources toward the thing that makes you money, which is servers, AI, and everything else. So that's where I would say the risk for them is very much the pressure from the street, not the pressure because gaming is or isn't working, the pressure that it's the opportunity cost of what else could they be doing if they weren't focused on something that is not inherently core to the overall Microsoft portfolio business, or more specifically, how much brain power can their CEO put behind gaming relative to everything else he should be paying attention to right now. The comment on TikTok though, I used to get this at Twitch. So like this is anchored toward my own experience where we would get pulled in the room and say, Twitch, we don't want you to exist, or we're very upset because we know that if people are watching streams, they're not playing our game, which was inherently not true because the games that did the best, commercially speaking, were also the games that performed very well on Twitch. In fact, there's a high correlation to successful launches circa 2015 through 2020 if your game broke into the top 10 on Twitch. Like, so to me, it's baffling to assume that because they're consuming content elsewhere, they're not actually going to go back and play your game at some point. In fact, it's probably the best form of marketing, at least in that era. It was like, put your game on Twitch, have a lot of eyeballs on it, see people actually play the game, get them jazzed and hyped. They're going to go back and buy the game themselves. Back when buying games was in vogue. I know Microsoft doesn't believe in that anymore either. Putting good coin toward buying a game for $70, they'd rather give it away for free, or I'm sorry, $30 a month. Sorry, that was a dig to my Xbox fanboy. But back to my point, TikTok's the same thing. You know what sucks in gaming right now more than anything? Discovery, finding a game that has value to you as a player. It's impossible. Like Twitch is awful at discovery. You could buy discovery by buying your way to the leaderboard, which is his marketing spend, but you have no real way to organically get there on your own. This is what TikTok's great. TikTok's the best. They're not incentivized the same way. They're not a social network. They're a consumption engine, and all TikTok cares about is putting the right piece of content in front of the right user at the right time to have them consume that 30-second to a minute clip, and on and on and on, and keep feeding you more of the same. So to me, that is a discovery platform. And the biggest games on TikTok, Free Fire, Roblox, Minecraft, are also the biggest games in the world, right? And so it's just flummoxed me to be like, no, TikTok is not a threat. It's a discovery engine for you to people to find your game. And so if you are spending all this money on Ninja Gaiden 4, which by our estimations at my game was a massive and colossal flop, like maybe put more of that marketing dollars not in a pretty presentation at SGF, but maybe figure out how to crack TikTok to get the eyeballs to that game so Ninja Gaiden 4 can find the audience that might be interested in it because the channels you are trying to break through are just not working. So that's my criticism. And honestly, Microsoft, if you're concerned with TikTok, you're not big enough to be concerned with TikTok taking your time away from you. You should be concerned about the other gaming platforms winning out on you because they are, and less concerned about TikTok because that seems to be scapegoating a larger problem that's happening at Microsoft, which is they're just not good at marketing games that they're putting out in market, and they keep shrinking the organization, thus making it harder for them to do it next year and next year and next year.
See, time is finite, though, right? I only have 24 hours in a day, and 10 of them are spent to sleeping. No, I can't sleep that much, right? And then, you know what? Anytime my eyes aren't on the Xbox, right? That is Xbox losing screen time to someone else, right? And you have more and more kids. It's great to have discovery. And yeah, it's great for people to watch Minecraft videos on TikTok. But quite frankly, other than the discovery aspect of it, it's not making me any money, people watching me. And then you have this sledding game, right? That's now people are hyped about that came out of nowhere. It happened to come on TikTok. Like I see it as both complementing it as well as competing with it, right? They are both my competition and my friend. How do we play nicely? And I think you have to look at it that way because again, kids would much rather swipe and watch a game. Not all kids, right? But there's a whole subset of kids that would rather watch a game than play a game. And I think people are having trouble understanding that aspect that kids are happy watching some people play these games. And Itamar, I don't know if you were about to say something. I kind of jumped right in there.
No. Yeah, I think you both talked about Microsoft gaming, how does it fit in their strategy, right? And I do think, and you mentioned it's kind of from the Ballmer era. And I think it started from the era where Windows was the platform and they saw other stuff as maybe like the gaming platforms, PlayStation, consoles in general, maybe casting a doubt over Windows as the main platform through which you do all your computing. And that's what they probably felt they had to step in. But now it's no longer the Microsoft strategy. Windows, they're not about Windows and on devices. So I agree that it's lost in a way. Now they're doing this Xbox everywhere, which is kind of a strange idea if you ask me. But I think that coherence of, okay, they stepped in when they wanted, yeah, this is an Xbox.
Xbox.
They wanted they wanted Windows front and center, so they stepped in to prevent other platforms from potentially taking more of your time. But now it's like, okay, where does it fit in? And on the flip side of that, you mentioned Roblox, Colin, and one question that I have, it's also related to that. I think they also had a horrible earnings reaction. why, and I don't know if people talked about that, why didn't Meta buy Roblox? Like, that makes so much sense to me. Is that something that could happen? And what do you think? What do you guys think about that?
Oh my gosh. Well, definitely not in the Biden administration. I think Lena Khan would have personally drove to the Bay Area to like put a stop and cease and desist on that
Yeah,
acquisition.
that's
So
a good
like
point.
I think regulatorily like not happening. I think Meta, for better or for worse, or not to be, it has become the punching bag of everybody's anger toward big tech. I mean, no one talks about YouTube. Like what's ruining our kids and blah 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 and ripping society apart. They blame Meta for everything. Never mind, there are other platforms of content distribution. So just put that there. But I think that's why regulatory. But it's an interesting point. Like and maybe that's why Microsoft doesn't talk about Minecraft at all, because they don't want people to realize they own the other giant playground of children that may or may not have issues because they're a giant playground of children. I'll just put it there. I don't want to say anything beyond that, but I think that's when I think Roblox is challenged, and I don't know how they get past that challenge, but they do have attention, right? And they created an ecosystem where people could build and create, and I think that's the interesting value behind Roblox. But as an interesting point, like why wasn't Meta or somebody else buying Roblox, and could it now? Maybe. That's maybe that's interesting. That was one of the big tech companies I was going to write about, that they just aren't in gaming anymore because they basically left it. Like Meta left gaming. They're like, nope, we lost. And same with Google. They're like, Stadia didn't work out. We're out. So like big tech, where they just kind of walk out of gaming, and their consumption of gaming content, like Meta and Instagram Reels, etc., is a big consumption platform for gaming content, as is YouTube, YouTube Live, etc. Like also a big consumption platform, but they're not in gaming the same way as the other big fan companies are trying to still be in gaming. Anyways, it's an interesting thought. Greg, do you have any thoughts on Roblox? Do you think Meta should have bought them?
I
Could they have
think
bought them?
I've never been a big Roblox player, and I feel like from a litigation perspective,
What? As a
I don't
middle-aged man, you're
know.
not a big Roblox player? Say
Crazy,
no
I
more.
know. I grew up with no, like I said, right? It goes with the ages. It's up to my age, but no, I think that the Roblox already was in a lot of trouble with Robux type of stuff, and there was a lot of bad sentiment around them from stuff like that, and I feel like I don't know. That's a pretty big stick you might want to stay far away from if you're already under your own scrutiny from people based on the platforms that you own. I just feel like, plus, I mean, Roblox. I mean, I know Meta could afford Roblox, right? But like, Roblox is a monster, and I don't know who owns it, but like, I imagine they want to
Roblox.
wait. Yeah, well,
They're
yeah,
publicly traded, their own company. Yeah, they're their own
yeah.
thing.
I don't see why they would want to be owned by someone when they can kind of make the decisions that they want, and they don't have to go through those hoops.
Well, being
I
publicly
think,
traded, not knowing their share structure, like it's not necessarily their decision anymore. If they're
Yeah,
privately held
fair.
like Valve, they can tell everyone to kick sand forever because they own themselves. But like now that they're publicly traded, Roblox not entirely in their decision, not know anything about their share structure. Chad, if you have any input on, do they have a super share owner like Mark Zuckerberg is with Meta? Then tell me that. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know that offhand.
No
yeah,
idea.
I think just as a thought exercise, like Roblox is like 5% of Meta's valuation or something like that. Just the reason I mentioned that is one, even though, yeah, hey, Meta is a punching bag, but they're probably, Instagram is a very tough platform to moderate. And at least they're doing the least worst job probably out of players out there, right? The other players out there are even worse, probably. And you could step in and say, well, we have to save the kids. We're good at this. That's what we do on Instagram. Also, they still have their metaverse still in their name, right? Which makes sense. It's a platform. Maybe it can do synergy with the devices. And I do think the short form entertainment, and that's what Instagram now is. It's basically a TikTok clone with it's a social graph, but it's a lot just about putting short form content that you'd find interesting. So connecting that with gaming and with discovery, maybe of like even the mini games. There's just a lot of things that make sense there. I'm not saying they're gonna buy them. I agree to everything that you guys said why it would not happen. But I just think it's an interesting thought experiment about things that they could maybe do, maybe on their own.
I concur. It's actually a really interesting thought experiment. I'm gonna like actually noodle on this a bit more. But let's like shout out the tech company that I have to, because it's the last bit of my piece. Billy, a solo, like a video content platform out of China, making by all accounts to me as a North American, a meme-ish game, Escape from Duck Off, a massive hit, right? Where they're just pulling in tons and tons of players. I think their concurrents have eclipsed at least where Arc Raiders currently sits on Steam as a extraction shooter, but with ducks, from a third person top down perspective. So they're but what did Billy do? Kind of back to the discovery thing. I think they used their power of owning a platform to put that duck off content in front of everybody to drive in the players. So they really leaned into the mechanisms they had to drive attention, at least for the audience in China. And then boom, duck off is a massive game on Steam. The always gray area of like China's firewall where everybody gets blocked except for Steam. They just kind of exist in this weird gray area where Chinese players can play on Steam. So shout out to them because it shows like tech can work and can make big games big, but they definitely lean on, my hunch is they lean very heavily on pushing their own stuff through their own platforms. Where maybe that would make Western companies a little bit more uneasy, where I can't see Netflix putting gaming on the front tile because that's what it would take. Like, hey, we got games, come play this game. Like maybe Microsoft does divest themselves. Maybe Bethesda's buyer would be someone like Netflix. That makes a lot of sense to me. It's a lot of IP that they could do a lot of things with, right? And then Elder Scrolls 6, the current the current Half-Life 3 game in my life, where it's like, is this game ever even being made? It's on the front tile of Netflix. I bet it would drive a lot of attention, but I don't know if Netflix would ever do that. Similarly, I don't think Amazon puts King of Meat on the Amazon store front page and have it just locked in there for a week straight, just putting stuff there. Like, I just think like what you see like out of Billy, at least my estimation is they're more willing to drive people to the stuff they create content wise than versus Western companies are less inclined to do that and leverage all the means and methods. But and I don't even know what that would look like for Microsoft. Like, am I gonna see Halo? Like, I'll bring it to you, Greg, on Halo. Halo appear on my home, like my Windows opening screen. It's like boom, there's Halo. I'm like, oh, Halo. Hello, old friend. Like, let me click on you. No, they're not, right? So it's just different like mindsets.
You remember when Cortana came out on Windows and everyone was outraged? Come on, that could have been the original Copilot. We had a perfect name and everything, and now we went backwards and we named it Copilot instead of Cortana.
That is a great point. I have to shout out to the reason, I think we kind of dance around. The reason why Xbox exists is that Gates saw the living room computer being a big business and a big thing in the future. And he was right. It just, the form factor was my TV set. Like, my TV set became the computer, not the box. The box was a conduit, but eventually it just got replaced with the TV set. And that's where maybe Microsoft, had they been earlier on the Xbox Everywhere strategy, they could have just straight up turned Xbox, live into an OEM, or for sell to the OEMs as a platform for all digital content distribution, not just games. And that probably would have been the move circa 2007 when you had Roku and etc. trying to break in there, and Fire Stick was just starting to get rolling. Like, that would have been the move. It's like, yeah, here, take our entire digital technology, layer it into your TVs, and turn the OEMs into your platforms, and care less about the box.
Well, I think that's what's coming, right? At least that's my idea on what they've been saying about this high-end premium Xbox that's coming, right? It's probably just gonna be a high-end computer that's kind of rebadged as an Xbox that lets you do everything a computer does. Yeah, I think they're putting all their money. First of all, I said this earlier, but I didn't come through to it. Like, they still will make AAA games, right? But they'll be on the PlayStations, the Nintendos, the PCs that are running this stuff, right? So they're not going to completely get out of gaming. They just want to be everywhere where gaming is, and I think they're going to invest heavily into some. Well, I'm not going to say that part. That one seems like a silly thing to say. They've invested heavily already, but I think they're going to be more careful in selecting the games they want to put out there and publicizing. I think Microsoft has always been ahead of its time. I think that's one of the things that big tech does. And yeah, they miss sometimes, but I go back to whoever the last guy was in charge of Xbox, Don Maddox, right? Who said, you always have to be online, and people freaked out. And now we're kind of in this place where, well, it's kind of happening anyway, right? Maybe he shouldn't have been as blunt about it. And, I think tech has a way of getting ahead of itself and then catching up years later. And I have a feeling this is one of those moments where consoles, I'm not going to go by the wayside, but why do I need another box to be able to play this when other boxes can already run this, right? And I think maybe they're seeing this now. And is it too soon? Is it too late? Who knows? It's timing that comes down to everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. A good point. And like, I'll shout out positive toward Xbox. I know I kind of railed on them for a while. I would say like I'm excited for Halo to be on PlayStation. I think that's a great way to reintroduce a otherwise dead franchise to a younger generation. Take the arguably best game of the series. I might, you can split hairs on Halo 2 or Halo OG, but like, to me those are the two, and put it on, modernize it, and enable younger generations to play it on any device, including the PlayStation. I think that's a smart strategy because, like, the path they're down on, like, Halo is no longer a mover of units for hardware. That's clear, right? So that's so. If you're going to do anything with that IP, it's got to exist anywhere. And as a Nintendo owner and fanboy generally, I can't wait for Master Chief to join the battle in Smash. Like clearly, you already have Minecraft Steve. Now they have the relationship. Now we just need Master Chief to appear as a playable Smash character, and inevitably this Smash game for the Switch too, right? But that's great. He's iconic and put him everywhere. And I'm glad he's not gonna be behind the wall of platform distribution. And that might be where Sony gets kind of tripped up in the next like decade. Like they are increasingly putting their games on other platforms, but are they waiting too long? Is an interesting question. Like Helldivers 2 was a success because it was on Steam on the launch date. I would argue not necessarily just locked behind PlayStation. And so, but like, they still put out Ghost of Yotei behind PlayStation only, but if they put it on Steam on the same day, it would have been a bigger game, you know, probably. But again, I guess Sony's in the business of selling hardware still. So that might trip him up in 5 to 10 years when hardware is less important than access to content seamlessly distribution wise. And it's less about buying the machine. The machine becomes a commodity, which I think is your point, Greg, right? The machine becomes a commodity.
I also think it's fascinating that they're building it on UE5. I think it's a very strategic decision to build upon Unreal, and they're going to get some hate for it, but it opens so many doors on other possibilities of what you can do with the franchise, and it's fascinating if they're going to lean into UGC. They already had their world building. I forgot what it was called, right? But do they make it easier to allow people to create content to put in there, right? They didn't. They already said it's not going to be a one-to-one remake, so there'll be some differences in there. To me, it's a question of is it enough to save the franchise, or did they already do so much harm that it's kind of can't come back from that? And that goes to your point on can it sell consoles anymore? I don't think it can, right? But maybe this will be the lifeline it needs.
Do you think ad supported model is going to win for them? I've been very public in thinking that I do not believe Microsoft could be good at ads until they show me they're good at ads, because I come from ad tech and they have historically been a train wreck with making money in ads. They recently bought, or not recently, over the last 5 years, they bought Xandr, the major DSP for ad targeting. They got the Netflix business as the exclusive distributor of Netflix ads. Netflix brought it in house, and Xandr, it no longer exists as the latest example of the graveyard of Microsoft trying to do ad tech. They just are terrible at ad tech. But maybe gaming would work. I'm incredibly dubious on that until I see it. I'm gonna see it to believe it, sort of thing. But do you think a cheaper price point with users getting hammered with ads is the path forward for Microsoft and getting more players in their games?
I think it all comes down to the user, the UI, right? The user interface. How well can I swipe between games, going to that next games? If I watch my son play on the tablet, right? He's going from video to video to video. If I can make games, and they already have on my Galaxy at least like instant load games. I'm sure Apple already has instant load games. If you can build instant load capabilities, which are coming to console, I see the free tier making a killing because you have these kids with short attention spans playing Snake for 5 minutes and swiping and playing Snake 2 for 5 minutes. And right, like I see it being a killer, but the user experience needs to be seamless. My kid can't be pissed off sitting here waiting for a game to load. He wants to go quick. Like, if this is the dribble we want to start creating for gaming, yeah, I see that working for the free tier. But that's how I see it working.
Interesting. Interesting. I think it's more of a, I think, I forget who said at the top of this podcast, but I think it's a tax on those who have less versus those who have a lot, right? That's all it is ads is a tax of time, right? I can't afford something, and thus I'm going to tax them with their time by making them sit through stuff that they may or not even be able to afford. And I think it's just kind of a continual theme that you see kind of breaking or whatever ripping in our society. And so it makes sense, and it's a way to get massive scale because a lot of people can't afford $30 a month for Game Pass anymore. So if you're going to make them suffer through ads, but it's the Fast Pass model, right? The Disney Fast Pass. You go to Disneyland or Disney World, you have 3 tiers. You have your ultra rich tier, which is you get the Disney Sherpa. They Sherpa you through the entire park. You don't wait in anything. You get every reservation you want. Yeah, and you have a great experience, and you pay tens of thousands of dollars for the Sherpa's time for like a group of 10, right? Then you have the fast pass people, the lightning lane, where you just get in there, you get your lightning lane, and you basically cut every line. But that's like the normal way to do it. I guess they just charge you an additional $40 or whatever per ticket. And then you have what they've now coined the standby line, which is like what used to be just the line, but now it's standby, which is everybody else. And they make them suffer in like 3 hour waits to get on, the Nightmare Before Christmas themed Haunted Mansion ride, because that's just the society we live in now. So maybe that's my parting shot. It's dark. It's dark.
I'm going to Disney in 2 days. This is all very helpful for me. I'm taking
Did you
notes
get the
rigorously.
Sherpa? You get the Sherpa with the
No,
vest? Oh,
maybe when we take off here and we're doing crazy well, we'll get a Sherpa here. Inamar, how do you feel about the model? Any last final words on it, I guess, from Microsoft side of things or Disney?
Yeah, so I would say one, and this is we're not gonna address all of this. I think, and this what Colin just said harkens back to what you said initially. How are people going to afford this, right? And I think we're very close. We're probably close to the fact where companies will go to the government and tell them, "Hey, please do UBI because we want people to be able to afford our stuff." So the biggest capitalists are going to be the ones who are asking for UBI the hardest. That's my hot take, but we're not going to cover this now, I'm sure. My last, and I don't know if we can address this question, but I am curious, knowing what we know now, which they knew at the time about their strategies in Xbox, Game Pass, all of that, Xbox Everywhere, all of these things. Why did Microsoft buy Activision Blizzard? Like we mentioned a lot of Microsoft games in this talk, not even a single Activision one. Why did they buy them? How does this make sense in light of everything they've done since?
man, I have 2 thoughts on that. One, it was discounted by 30%. So it was like a cheap deal, right? And I believe they sat on each other's boards. Chat if I'm wrong on that. But I recall reading something like that at some point. So that may or may not be true. I might be just forgetting that bit. But I think it was just a discounted company at the time. And I honestly think if they knew the regulatory hoopla and the years in court they'd be facing, yes, from LeadCon in the US, but more specifically from the EU and UK, I don't think they would have done the deal. I had they known what it was going to take to get the deal closed, I don't think they would have done the deal. And I think it was reported that they were looking at spinning off gaming as a failed enterprise at that point. And then I I swear I've read this, so but just don't source it in front of me right now, that they were like, oh, we got one more home run hit in us. Let's go buy Activision. It's on a 30% discount. We have the cash flow right now. It was pre-AI too. Again, I think the other bit is if there was post-AI boom, they never would have done the deal either. It was like in this weird 22 before ChatGPT came out where they were trying to figure out the growth model for Microsoft as a company. That clearly was AI. I don't think they would have done the deal post GPT launch. But yeah, just timing is weird on that one, right? So they ended up buying it at a discount as the home run attempt at winning gaming at a time that existed before AI really scaled and shifted their whole business model.
Yeah.
The question for you guys though is if the AI bubble bursts, if you believe there's a bubble, would they keep gaming?
When the AI bubble bursts, it's not like AI is going to go away. I think you're going to see a lot of these crappy products that have come out over time dissipate, but there's still a true underlying productive part of AI that's helped powering some of this business. So maybe there'll be a little bit of pullback, but thought AI as a whole is not going anywhere, right? I think people just need to get their realistic mindset on what it can do, how it can do it. So I don't think there's a true bubble that will burst. I think you'll see stock drop in my mind, right? You'll see stock drops from the major tech companies, right? But I don't see it being bursting like people think it is. I think it's going to be not the same form that it was when the dot-com bubble burst.
I think as far as your strategy, uh, like the Xbox Everywhere, that's like the Satya Nadella like gaming strategy, and they're gonna keep at it for a while, even if it's not working. The 3.0 version of that is probably gonna work, something around distribution and whatever, and that's gonna be Microsoft Gaming, and there will probably a lot of people will get hurt in the process as they understand what they want to keep, but that's probably staying for the long term. That would be my bet.
Colin is jumping. You want to say anything before you jump?
No, thanks for hosting me, and apologies. I have to run to my next thing. But Greg, it's been a pleasure as always. I'm now going to put co-host banner on my LinkedIn profile, and that's where you can find me, Colin Nace, Mind Game Data, Screen Engine ASI, and I do a lot of writing and content on LinkedIn as my primary platform. So if you like what I have to say, follow me there. Thanks all. Appreciate
Take
the
it
time.
easy, Colin.
Bye.
Itamar, thank you
Colin.
so much for your time today, man. I hope we didn't scare you away for good.
Thank you for
Before
having me.
Yeah,
It's a
before we
pleasure.
go, is there you want to let the people know where they can find you or Affogato?
Yeah, same as Colin. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'll probably tag it on this post, or if not, I'll add a comment. But Affogato, AFFEOGATA, and we're not super vocal. We should be more, but we do try to post interesting things from time to time. And happy to connect with anyone who's in the industry
Awesome. Yeah, we'll
or
put
side
out
of
a
it, I
post
guess.
afterwards, linking to all this stuff as well. Itamar, thank you so much for sharing this. Everyone said, we're not coming with solutions here, but I love being able to take the different looks at the industry. So for those of you that are still listening, we appreciate it. We'll be back here in 2 weeks because next week we'll be in Disney and we're not going to worry about work